the thing shared to share?
Yeah.
Where is it at?
No, it'll pop up in your. Okay, hang on. We are live. Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Let our coaches come on screen here. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome again to the Coach's Corner. I'm very happy to have you again on a Friday night. Tonight, we are going to be discussing books and resources that we use as trainers and fighters to become better coaches and better fighters as well. And tonight, I'm joined by Viscount Tristan, and we have special guests tonight. We have Sir Rauokinn from Ontario, who we stole most of our book list from, because she's been compiling a list of books for quite some time, and we just kind of use that for a basis for the book list that we have on the Coach's Corner, which will be coming out soon if it's not available already. And we have Sir Helgi from Kaid, who is my own personal book of the month club recommendation guy. Every time Helgi tells me I got to read a book, he's been absolutely right. Totally nailed that. So very happy to have both of them joining us. So how you guys doing tonight?
Good. It's a Friday.
Yeah. We're going to talk about books like we always do anyway. All right. So, as always, just a little note for the viewers out there. Please feel free to ask questions in the Facebook live stream. We're more than happy to. We always love having the questions coming in, and we'll do our best to answer those questions as we can. But unfortunately, we can't always get to all of them. It's nothing personal. We just have a limited amount of time to do some of that stuff. So, but definitely happy to have those comments, and yeah, jump right in. So, what do you think, Tristan? You want to kick us off?
Yeah, it sounds good. Now, as we approach this episode, we had a huge list, obviously a bunch of books. There's so much great stuff. We split it into some categories to kind of break it down. And the first category we'll talk about is strategy. And I think, and any SCA fighter I know has heard of this book, The Book of Five Rings. And this made it to the kind of the top of our strategy list by Miyamoto Musashi. It's a short book. I've actually got a copy of it here. You can see this is, like almost pamphlet level caliber book. But it's quite cryptic. It's written by a lot of words. So
it looks like Tristan's breaking up a little bit.
It's one of those books that you'll get different things out of it. With that, also realize that there are a bunch of different translations. So try to find a translation that makes sense to you. There are versions of it that are written for businessmen and things like that. So I had to dig around to find one that I felt fit fighters pretty well. So that would be my recommendation for Book of Five Rings. Anybody else?
Go ahead,
Any
Rick.
comments on that one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I have a different
Rifkin?
version of the Book of Five Rings. Let's see if you can see that. It's the Thomas Cleary one, and it's a hard copy, and it comes with 2 CDs, which I find very handy because I put them on in my car while I'm commuting. Let's see, I have one right here. And I learned something different from listening to the Book of Five Rings every time I put it on. So I would definitely endorse that one. Put it on, just listen to it. For me, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm so busy now that reading actually doesn't have a great place in my life. So the Audible books are the where it's at for me. So that's a really good choice.
And it looks like Helgi went and got his copy of it.
Yeah, I got it as well. Victor Harris was the translator I found. So I don't really have much more to add to everybody's experience. I mean, the thing that I loved was his discussions about the mental aspects of it, of martial art, and dealing with fear, something that we don't really necessarily experience in our game, because we know that at the end of the day we're going to go home and we're going to go drink with our buddies, tell the no shit there I was stories, and everybody's going to be great. But when you're dealing with life and death, there's a lot of fear and anxiety that takes over, and he emphasizes the idea of imagining yourself being dead already, of being emotionless, and mastering your fear, which I think is, whether we're actually at risk or not, is an important concept that we have to deal with when we are on the field and competing.
Yep.
I think
I know that because we had so many books, we were concerned about how long we would talk about it. We really cannot do justice to the Book of Five Rings in 2 minutes or 3 minutes of discussion. It really is a profound book. Did you, Sean? I'm sorry. Did you have something you wanted to put?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, for me, it is absolutely my family Bible. And the thing about the Book of Five Rings is, as Tristan mentioned, it's located in the business management section of most bookstores, and because this is a book that it's not just about fighting. This is a book that talks about defeating an opponent. And it kind of uses combat and 2 swords, Japanese style swords, as the framework for that discussion. But when you kind of dig right into it, it's the philosophy of how to defeat an opponent, and that's one of the really profound things that I get out of it. I think one of my favorite sections in there is the part that talks about and something that has really changed my fighting, was the part that says that there is no defensive mindset, that everything you do is part of the act of killing. And that kind of led to me finding what I refer to as the offensive mindset in our sport. That kind of razor thin edge between passive and aggressive, where you're prepared always to do combat, and that you're more likely to strike into something than you are simply to defend against something. And as your opponent is throwing shots at you, you're going to respond in kind. And one of the things that I always mention about that philosophy in the offensive mindset is, if you're responding offensively to what your opponent does, if nothing else, at least you're part of the equation, right? You're not just standing there hoping that you block enough stuff to keep alive there. So those are some of the big things.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the first book we talk about had to be this one, just because if you don't read it, you're just missing out. It will give you something profound. There's a ton, like almost every sentence, and it has a great deal to offer, but it's hard to interpret that. You'll go back and read this book year after year after year after year, and you'll always get something new from it. So Let's move on to obviously another one that's a tried and true is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. This one talks a little bit more on the strategic level of warfare between armies and whatnot, but there's still some really great stuff in there about handling conflict in terms of the strategy aspect that do apply. Anybody else have comments on The Art of War by Sun Tzu?
Misty, you got anything on that, Rifkin?
Oh.
All right. So my interpretation on Sun Tzu has been where the Book of Five Rings tends to be more individual combat focused or defeating an opponent. Although in that he also says that if one person can defeat 10 people, then 10 people can defeat 100 people and so on. But I think The Art of War kind of goes along with a couple of the other books that we have on the list here, which are On War by Clausewitz and The Prince by Machiavelli. Some similar concepts from different geographical regions of the time period, where it is more the kind of the administration of, once you've conquered a land, how do you maintain what you've conquered? How do you keep what you've taken? And I think all those books, Art of War, On War, and The Prince, all talk about that. They kind of talk about the what do you do with the family of the leader who you just deposed? And I think some of that, and certainly in Machiavelli, it's basically you eliminate them, you kill them. So I think that's kind of what I got out of Sun Tzu on that, The Art of War.
Yeah, the things that I remember taking away from the others as well was kind of looking at the conflict or the interaction between you and your opponent in terms of a big picture. It's easy for us to get caught up in the little things of footwork and timing and shot placement and those other things. But when you talk about strategy, you're talking about an overall, take a step back and see the whole picture of what's going on. And all right. Yeah, let's actually move on because we've got some other categories to cover. The next category is SCA specific fighting manuals. And we've only got a few here, but I'm going to let Rifkin kind of take the lead and describe these.
Sure. There is a few. There's Duke Paul just published a book. Duchess Elena has a book called The Armored Rose. What was the other one?
Duke
Patrick has Le Trompe de Viol. I think I have that somewhere around here. Viscount Sigifrith from the West has a How to Fight manifesto, which I think is incredibly good. It's all about him training with Uther back in the day, and he lays it all out. And then there's a whole bunch more PDFs and stuff that people have put together that are really great. Count Gemini, it's not a book, but he has a DVD set called Oplomachia, which is fantastic. So there's a lot out there, and it's all really accessible. I think Duke Paul and Elena's books are on Amazon even. I don't know how to get Duke Patrick's book anymore. I looked before the show and I don't see it online anymore, so I'm not really sure where that is. But a lot of the stuff that's electronic, you'll find in the file sections of a lot of the fight groups on Facebook. I know I've put most of them in the On Tier Fight group for my kingdom, and I'm happy to upload them to the Known World site as well.
Actually, now that you mentioned that, I did want to say too that Book of Five Rings and Art of War are in the open domain, so you can get free PDFs if you do a Google search for them. So it's great to have a hard copy, but if you want to hunt around, you can get those. And I think the other On War and The Prince probably are in the same realm because they're so old.
Yeah, probably.
All right. I know Duke Paul's book came out fairly recently. I want to say within the last year or so.
Yeah, that's about right.
I've not read it. But I know Duke Paul's system is very solid, like, and he is a great teacher. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at that. Like anything, it won't be the how-to recipe book for how to be a great fighter. But like all these books, they will give you insights and give you some ideas for things to build on, or things to add into your own fighting. So now let's move on to the next category, which is martial arts and fighting, which is non-SCA specific. And this is where things start to open up a bit. The first one that we wanted to highlight, which was the Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. And I'm sure everybody's heard of Bruce Lee and probably knows of this book. It was really his innovative work at combining martial arts together into a system, and one that was built on efficiency that is the thing to take home from this book. It was a great innovator at the time, and even Bruce Lee's fame, I think, even diminished a little bit of the intention of the work that he did in innovating his martial art. He was a great movie star, tremendously charismatic, but he was also a genius in terms of developing an effective art from other sources. And that's kind of what every single fighter does. They make their own art from the sources that they run across and they make it to suit themselves. And so when you read that, what I took out of it was seeing how he studied. He went and he looked at different martial arts and what their strengths were and how they were going to integrate into what he knew he could do or what he felt was the most efficient. And I think that insight is a valuable one to take. Not that there was any single particular technique or anything like that in there, but it was the attitude and the approach that I think was the gold mine there. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think Tristan definitely touches on the big thing that I got out of that is for as great a martial artist as Bruce Lee was, I think he is very much overlooked for being a philosopher as well. And two things that I really get out of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do is the fact that the first half of the book does not talk about any JKD specific techniques. The first half of it talks a great deal about something we talk about on the show a lot, and that is the why. It's the philosophy behind every strike, every decision you make. It talks about the decision-making process of the fight, and how you see the fight. And I think it's really significant that he spends so much time discussing the why before he gets into the how, that he puts that part of the book first, and then the JKD specific techniques come after that. And it's a book that from what I understand was actually written, compiled posthumously by his wife and another a friend of his. They had basically taken all the notes that he had been writing down for years with the intent to write the book, and they compiled them and put them all together. And in the other thing that I got out of that was in the foreword for the book, the other author of the book, I can't remember his name right now, but one of the things that he said in the foreword was that Bruce Lee had always said that there is nothing new in this book. Everything that exists here has existed for hundreds of years. He wasn't creating something from scratch. He was just revealing it in a way or describing it in a way that he sees it, to be able to kind of reveal those truths. And I think that's what a lot of us do, especially in SEA combat, as it is still a very new martial art. We come up with, we're not coming up with anything new. There's nothing new to be created. It's just new ways of seeing it. And each one of us, all the coaches that we have on the Coach's Corner, we all come to this from different experiences, and we all get this, we can describe exactly the same concept in countless ways. And that's the value of what we do, is being able to get it from as many different sources as you need. So Rifkin, did you have anything else on this one?
I think I'm on my 4th copy of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Somebody I think just gifted me the expanded version. There's a new version now.
Nice.
It's just fantastic. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm sort of a book collector. And when I go through the books, it's a lot like when I'm learning from someone else. I take notes and I put my notes in my journal and I go back and I look at them. So I kind of want to emphasize that when you use these tools, books, use them the way that you would anything else. Take your notes, put them in your book. If you don't understand something, talk to your trainer, your coach about it. We all learn more when we collectively share our thoughts and our interpretations of these manuals.
Yeah, and that was one of the things we were talking about before the show is like, we all have read these books pretty extensively, and we're all looking for similar books to make us better coaches. But at the same time, we all take different things from each of these books, and there's so much to be taken, and there's so much to be interpreted from each of those. And so, the 4 of us are going to read the same book and come up with, at least 4 different interpretations and things that we think are the key points that need to be talked about, and going back to the Book of Five Rings a little bit, one of the common phrases that he has in there is when he finishes his little parable, he always ends it with something like, this requires great consideration, or you must think about this a lot. And it's one of those where and I think the Tao Jeet Kune Do is another one of these too, where the first time you read it, you pretty much just have to get through it to be exposed to the information without digging too deep into what does it mean and how does this apply. Just get through it and absorb it and find out what's in there, and then you can go back section by section and dig a little deeper into it, but just get through it once to begin with. So we have several other books in this category for martial arts and fighting, non-SCA specific. I think we're going to have Helgi go over a couple of the other books that we have there.
If I could just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
The Tao of Jeet Kune Do was compiled from Bruce Lee's notes, which he had plenty of, and it was a beginning. And I wanted to mention the book I put on the list, Jeet Kune Do by John Little. John Little actually compiled the rest of his notes into multiple volumes. And this will come up later in the fitness category as well, because he studied all of Bruce Lee's notes on his workouts and fitness and whatnot. But it was by far the best job of he had Linda's approval to go through these notes, compile them, and add more to what Bruce was wanting to do. And so I just wanted to add that one in there before we jump off the Bruce Lee thing. So
yeah, that's great.
I actually was going to comment on the Tao of Jeet Kune Do as well. Just mention the other thing that I loved about the book was the practicality of it. Right. One of the things that he emphasizes is that you have to test take from everywhere, but that has to be tested. All techniques have to be tried out. And he was a huge proponent of sparring. Because, if you practice forms are great for understanding mechanics and so on, but unless it works in the environment that it's intended to be tested in, it's not gonna, that is the ultimate, foundation. That's the ultimate truth that we're all aiming for.
All right, you want to jump into some of the other books that we have in this category?
Sure. So the book that I recommend to everyone is called The Book of Martial Power, The Universal Guide to Combative Arts by Stephen Perlman. This book is fantastic. A lot like some of the other ones that we've talked about. It's very, very dense. Lots of references and cross references. It's mentioning, it's drawing links between different techniques and so on. But the foundation of the concept is not what this martial art believes or how you throw a punch or whatever. It's what are the universal concepts, universal principles underlying all martial arts. And this is one of the things that really helped me appreciate other martial arts beyond the SCA combat. Like I love watching boxing, MMA. You know, a lot of us look to these other things because of their popularity, but I see a lot of the similarities in our art because of understanding the fundamental principles that he talks about. And some of them are philosophical, like what makes a good victory? Why is one victory better than another victory? You know, we can talk about efficiencies. You know, how hard do you need to punch or strike? You know, at what point does too hard become a detriment to you? You know, and it goes into physiomechanics, understanding like how rotational energy, how we develop that rotational energy, and how that translates when rotating around, for example, the axis of our spine or the axis of our forearm. You know, where do we find efficiencies in that? To things like philosophy and the mental side of it, like no mind, and yeah. The second book that I was going to recommend is The Liar.
Could I actually say something about the Martial Power book? It's a fantastic book, and I actually trained locally with the guy who knows Stephen Perlman, and he was able to kind of give me a little bit of insight. I bought the book because it is a great book, but be warned that Perlman is a martial artist, but he's also like an engineer. So it's written by a guy who has taken the engineering mind and saying, okay, what are the mechanics behind power? So when you read it, unless you're into kind of engineering speak, it will kind of be a thick read, but it is comprehensive. He has broken down everything in terms of figuring out power. And if you are of an engineering kind of thought process, you're going to jump on that book and you're going to tear it up. It is really a great one, but it's got a flavor that's a little different for the reader.
I concur. It's super dense. I recommend it to a lot of people. Not everybody finds the connection with it. And even when I was reading it, I had to read, sections, like 5 sections, and then put it down because it was so dense that, I had to sit there and process it and think about, okay, he's talking about, throwing a punch, but how does that apply to SCA combat? How does that translate into throwing a strike with a sword, throwing a flat snap, throwing an offside? The second book that I was going to recommend is called The Liar, the Cheat, and the Thief: Deception in the Art of Swordplay by Maya Soderholm. This is a book about, lying to your opponent. And it is really the work of the teachings of her master, a man named Sunny Umpad, who was a master of the Visaran Katakordano style of eskrima, which works exclusively with knives and blades, lots of different blades. At the heart of it is the discussion of what is deception. But then it begins to break it down further into how we translate that deception into our body language. How do we set up patterns? How do we break those patterns? What are feints? How do we create traps for our opponent that we want them to fall into? If you get this book, I highly recommend picking up the Kindle or online version because she updates the links to it regularly. So you can actually find now YouTube links to a lot of the drills that she describes and the movement concepts.
Wow. All right. I think we've got Rivkin wanted to cover one of these in this particular section as well.
So I just wanted to bring up Peter Ralston's book, The Principles of Effortless Power. My copy is really well worn. along with working with Duke Sean, after coming back from having a baby, this book totally changed the way that I thought about fighting and about generating power. He's all about relaxing and fighting while relaxed. It's a little esoteric, so read it slowly, but there is some really, really, really good stuff in here. I can't recommend it highly enough. Octomasati's turned me on to it, and he was right. So Peter Ralston.
Right on. And yeah, so just to kind of cover some of the other, or just let you know about some of the other books that we had in this particular category. There's Championship Fighting by Jack Dempsey. Timing.
I could just say a word on that one.
Yeah,
That is here's how to use body mechanics to generate power, and laid out in a very simple language kind of way. The language is a bit dated because I think he wrote it in the 20s or 30s or something like that. It's kind of charming in that sense, but it is a nuts and bolts. Here's how you generate power with your body. So if that's kind of what you're looking for, fantastic book.
And then we have Timing in the Fighting Arts by Lauren Christensen and William Demir. Footwork Wins Fights by David Christensen.
Yeah, David Christian. I've not read this book, but he hosts a podcast called The Modern Martial Artist, and they have fantastic breakdowns of primarily boxers, but he talks about and outlines and shows and with video how they use body shifts to generate power, strategy, that sort of thing. And it's really second to none. I know we've shared quite a few of those videos. I know Branus likes sharing those, but that's a podcast to check out, The Modern Martial Artist.
The videos that he has on YouTube channel also are great. His breakdown of some of the really, really classic fights, whether they're in the golden age, between Muhammad Ali and
George Foreman was on there, I think. And he's done all the ones, even Lomachenko and some of the new ones too.
Right. And then it's the Four Kings saga. I mean, it's a series, man, and you have to watch the whole thing because he studies the history of this and what's going on between the fighters and their own reports of what was happening in each round. So,
yeah, it's a feast. It's a feast.
Right on. And then the other one that we had that hasn't been mentioned in this category is Fight Like a Physicist. The Incredible Science Behind Martial Arts, and that's by Jason Tolkien.
So this one is also just if you're an engineer or you understand physics, this is a great book for you, and it's a lot more accessible than the Book of Martial Power. But yes.
Right on. We'll take a look at that. All right. So the next category that we had for this was mental preparation, motivation, and philosophy. And I think this is one that we all use a lot of, this particular section, because there is so much philosophy in what we do, especially as you get into the higher levels of execution of our sport. And I think we're going to have Rifkin talk about the first book that we have on this one.
Sure. Did we want to answer Branos's question first?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll answer Branos's question.
Okay.
Branos asked whether as you progress as a fighter, you get different things out of the books, and it's 100% yes. Every time I read the Book of Five Rings, I get something else out of it. And as I understand what I'm doing more, and I discover how much I don't know about what I don't know, I get more and more out of it. There are books like the Book of Five Rings and the Principles of Effortless Power that I go, and the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, that I go back to over and over and over. And every time I read them, I get something else out of it, because you go to stages in your fighting where you're ready for something new. Sean's going to talk about the Unfettered Mind later. But that is another one. You have to go back over and over and over. It's only 12 pages. Oh my God, that thing is dense. But yeah, so as you understand what you're doing more, those books will speak to you in different ways.
Yeah, and you'll read it a second time or third or fifth or eighth time, and something will hit you so squarely in the head, and you'll say, how on earth did I read this book and not get this. Like this is it. And you're right. You put it perfectly. You're ready for it. And that doesn't happen the first time you read it or even the fifth or sixth. It takes time for you to be ready for that to resonate. And I think all these books are that way.
Okay, did you have something on that question too?
Nope.
All right. I just echo what Tristan and Rivkin have both said. It is an absolute yes for exactly that reason that you're just not ready for it. There are parts of it that are in there that you've read thousands of times, but you're just not ready for it. And I know for me, when I do my fighting clinic, the lecture that I do at my fighting clinic has been the same for like 15 years. Because exactly that reason. Either you haven't heard this before, or if you did hear it before, you weren't ready for a portion of it. Even though I said it, your brain just wasn't ready for it. And I know Rifkin's been to my class a couple of times, and I think she can kind of attest to the fact that she picks up something every time she comes to class, and that's why it is the same lecture every time.
Yeah, I call it finding $5 in my pocket. I will rewatch Sean's classes or retake them, or even just look through my fighting notes, and it's always like finding a $5 bill that you lost or that you never really knew you had there, because something just resonates with you that didn't resonate before. I was going to start, the mental aspect of fighting is sort of my geek. It's what I purchase the most books and the most audible books on. One of the best books out there is Mastery by George Leonard. This book will change the way you think about training and practicing and what you're after with the fight. It'll make you refocus to like enjoying the process. And I think that is one of the most hugely important things for longevity, is figuring out how to enjoy the process, and figuring out that, if you're doing something that you enjoy, it's a life well spent. And this book is just really beautiful about how he lays it out. And it's really, really cool. So that's Mastery by George Leonard. And then does anyone else want to talk about Mastery before I go on?
Yeah, I would like to jump in there. This is something that I've given to many of my students when they are running across some kind of a problem, like a plateau, or they're having kind of an internal issue with their own spirit. And if I had a top 5 books that every human being on the planet should read, this would be on that list. Like, it is that much of a game changer with not only how you look at your training, but how you look at yourself. It's like a mirror. It will, as you read it, it will describe to you how you are and let you identify the type of person you are. And it just shines this incredible light. And I've given this to students that have been struggling with plateaus, and they read it, and suddenly they are released from this plateau that they've been hanging on, and suddenly they start increasing in their progress. I can't say enough about it. It's a short book. It's a fast read, but everybody that I've given it to comes back and says, that is one of the best books I've ever written, or that I've ever read. And, they go out and buy a copy immediately, because they're like, it was so nourishing for their soul and for their training. It's an amazing book.
Yeah. Helgi, you had something else?
Oh, no, at this point we've moved on.
Okay,
from
we
that.
moved past that there. Right on.
One of the other, it's sort of a book and CD set that I think is really good for training the mental part of the fight, is called the Gold Mental Workout for Combat Sports. And you can get it on the Stadion website. It's by Darius Nowicki. You read a lot of books and they sort of tell you what to do. This book actually gives you the tools and the exercises to lead you through visualization, meditation, learning how to focus big and small. It's helped me immensely. It helped me immensely just learn how to quiet my thoughts. I think I've bought at least a dozen of these and given them to people. It's really, really good if you're struggling at all with how to quiet your mind when you're prepping for tourneys, or you just, you can't shut your real life out. I love it. And I do it almost every night before I go to bed because it helps me sleep. So, and then there's a ton of other really good mental books. Somebody put in the comments, A Fighter's Mind and A Fighter's Heart. I have those on Audible, really, really good. My friend recommended The Mind Gym by, I think it's Gary Mack. It's a good book. The New Toughness Training for Sports by James Lear is good. There are so many. Just, you got to kind of dig through them and find what speaks to you. Helga turned me on to a couple that are just really upfront and in your face. I think one is like, get the fuck out of your way or something like that. And they're really good too. And
That book written by Helga?
Should have been, right? Sounds like her.
That's her title for sure.
Yeah. So there's so many really good ones. I'll let other people talk, but
I think one of the reasons there are so many is that mental hangups and mental traps are so common with martial art training and performance and competition.
Any sport.
Right, exactly. Far more than the physical.
And not just sports, not even physical attribute. I mean, any type of competition, right? So chess and we mentioned the Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin is a fantastic book. I recommend that one to everyone. The Talent Code. Another one that I really enjoy and recommend regularly. But all of these, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to touch a little bit on the Talent Code as well. That's another one that Helgi turned me on to that definitely solidified his status in my mind as my personal book list. So the thing about the Talent Code is, it talks about cultivating talent instead of discovering it, or instead of just being faster and more athletic and being gifted, if you will,
natural.
I mean, this is a book about how to create talent, and it was and it covers a lot of science on basically muscle memory and how we learn things. And so it was very much a how-to, and it references several different scientific studies on myelin and some other things that kind of lead to mastery and muscle memory. And I know Tristan's read quite a bit of that too.
Yeah, you turned me onto that one, and it is a great book. And it's just the thing that resonated with me is that it says, or it talks about the fact that basically don't worry that don't feel that you're a natural, because there really aren't naturals. There just happen to be people that are in an environment that allows them access to train and get better, and that it's not that you're not talented. It's that you do the work and you get the pay, and you get the benefit. And I think that's an important lesson for anybody to realize is, never be down on yourself for thinking you're not a natural talent and you're not going to be good. It's going to be, you do the hard work and you will be good. At the end of the day.
Yeah. And along those lines, another one that I put on the list here that I wanted to just touch on briefly, which I think is related, is a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. This is a book that demystifies the idea that people are successful because they're genius, right? There are a lot of things, and one of the things that I really got out of this book was, it uncovers the fact that a lot of people that we view as successful are in some cases a product of circumstance. And I know for me, that is very much my story of success in the SCA. I happened to catch it at the right age and I was excited about SCA combat to begin with. And so that definitely helped. But you add to that, you know, the person that I was squired to and him winning crown right after, and me traveling around and at a time when there was this explosion of talent that or technique that was happening in the SCA. There's so many things about, you know, I've just been in the right place a lot of times, and I was prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. But you know, I'm not this good because you know I fell out of the womb with a, you know, golden arm and you know, silver stick of rattan in my hand. So and that's a really really great book. That's a book that references the 10,000 hours to mastery that we hear a lot of. So definitely recommend that one, and I think it kind of goes along with the ideas that are in the talent code.
I
So we've
add
got,
one more.
yeah, we've got a lot. So I was
Okay.
going to say, go ahead, Rifkin. There's a lot in this section. I love it.
Yeah, I just it's not a book I actually read particularly for fighting, but it's called The Power of Habit. And people always ask me how I'm so disciplined and dedicated. It's not about really being disciplined and dedicated. It's about making habits and about doing small changes in your life daily to fit the things in that are important, and changing, like making new habits isn't as hard as taking away your old ones that are ingrained. And it's a really, really great book. And it can be life changing. So if you're one of those people that I say, you know, I don't have time for pel work, I don't have time for whatever, get The Power of Habit on Audible, listen to it on your commute, and change your life.
Also, Charles Duhigg, who's the author of that book, wrote another one called Smarter, Better, Faster that I also really enjoyed. Both of those books are fantastic. Yeah.
All right, you'd raised your hand, Helgi, before. Did you have another one you want to throw in there?
Well, I mentioned Art of Learning, and I felt like I didn't do quite enough service to it, simply because if you are familiar with the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, about the childhood chess prodigy, that movie is about Josh Waitzkin. And the thing that's really fantastic or interesting about his story is that over the course of his life, he became a world master of chess by the age of like 16, 17, right? And continued to be active in chess, but at a certain point, he was done with it. He had achieved what he wanted to achieve, and he wasn't getting the enjoyment anymore. So he switched over to Tai Chi push hands, which is basically a martial form of competitive standing wrestling and control. And after several years, he went from being a brand new practitioner of the sport to winning the world championship in Taiwan. And then after that, he joined up Marcelo. God damn it.
One guy.
Yes, thank you. Marcelo Garcia, who is an amazing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and worked under him to earn his black belt, and has now since earned his black belt. So he has gone through and become an expert in 3 different areas, and that's really kind of what this book is about, is how he goes through that, how he learns. And while it is his personal take, he does provide some very concrete examples so I highly, highly recommend that. Gracie. Nope, not Gracie.
All right. So there's a couple more in this category that I definitely wanted to touch on, but if anybody else wants to jump in with some of these others before I hit these 2. That's all right. So there's a book called Zen in the Martial Arts. It's by Joe Hyam. This is a book. Joe Hyam was a journalist in the Bay Area in the late 70s or early 70s, who had been openly disparaging of martial arts as a concept, until a friend of his says, "Hey, why don't you just come to this one martial arts practice and see if that changes your mind." And the practice that he was taken to was Bruce Lee's practice, and that experience led to a lifetime of martial arts for Joe Hyam. He literally was practicing at the dojo the day before he went in the hospital the final time. So literally until his death, from being being openly disparaging of martial arts. But the concepts that are in this, it's a very short book. It's like maybe 100 pages, and it is, again, it's short little parables that he has that I kind of came to this book late in my fighting career, and by the time I was reading it, there was a whole lot of me going, "Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I'm saying," and things that I had discovered, and it was really nice to kind of get some validation for some of the things that were intuitive to me that he had described. It's a really great book, and there's each one of those parables just short little lessons that are going to be pretty profound. I don't know if any of the rest of you guys have read that one.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, it's good.
Mhm.
And then the other one that I wanted to mention was The Unfettered Mind, as Rifkin was mentioning. The Unfettered Mind is, the subtext is writings of the Zen master to the sword master. It's it is very much philosophy. It's Zen philosophy. It's by Tokuan Soho. I want to say, well, this one is also in the public domain. You can get PDF versions of this for free as well. There's so much in there, but one of the things that always stuck with me about this particular book was this concept of where your mind is within your body, right? If your mind is only in your hand, then it's not available to be anywhere else in your body. And for me, that always kind of goes along with this idea of pre-programming our fight. If you decide that you're going to throw a flat snap and there's nothing that's going to get in your way of throwing a flat snap, you're so fixated on doing that one thing that your mind can't be anywhere else. And while you're trying to make that flat snap happen, you're missing out on so many other things that are happening in the fight, and a lot of other things that are easier for you to get to than the one thing that you've decided that you're gonna get. So like, where is your mind in your fight? And the answer that they have in the book is that your mind needs to be everywhere and kind of nowhere, so that it can be available to be everywhere. And it's a very much a Zen concept, where you have to kind of visualize. I mean, the idea of visualizing where your brain is within your body is a bit much. And I know Rifkin has read that too. I think she might have some thoughts on that.
My thought with that is it's only 12 pages. Don't let that fool you. It really is something that you have to take slow. And don't be put off by the esoteric nature of the writing. Just sort of sit with things, like read a little bit at a time and sit with things, and then read some more, or read it all the way through and then go back and read chunks, because it really is a very heavy 12 pages.
That is. Tristan, Helgi, either one of you guys, you want to go over some of these other ones that we have?
No, I think we've covered most of the ones. Yeah, to speak.
Cool. I'll just kind of give a list of some of those other ones we didn't talk about. Beyond the Known by Tristan Dong.
Mm-hmm. That one is primarily focused, and I added that one to the list. I'm sorry, I missed that one. That is really focused on people doing like sports competition and competing, and what it's like to keep your mind focused on without it being too focused. It's sort of that mental and spiritual side of competing. And I was given this book many years ago, and I read it, and I thought it was just really a great book. Again, it's very short. It's a lot like Unfettered Mind, but kind of direct and to the point about managing all of your emotions and thoughts when you're competing.
Right on. And then we have Peak, Secrets from the New Science of Expertise by Anders Erickson, excuse me. I think we covered The Fighter's Mind, The New Mental Toughness, Training for Sports by James Lohr, and then Rules of the Night, or Rules for a Night by Ethan Hawke. You got one on that, Riff?
That Ethan Hawke, the actor with the mustache that looks like he's got a runny nose, that Ethan Hawke?
So that's not a mental book. That was more a book about the chivalric virtues and how to be a good knight. And we didn't really have a category for that, but surprisingly enough, Ethan Hawke has some really good insights, and he presents it in a very consumable way. That it's a book that I totally recommend if you are into the chivalric virtues and just sort of looking and reflecting at yourself and trying to be the best knight you can be. I think it's wonderful.
All right. So the next category that we have on this is training, coaching, and teaching. And the one book that we really wanted to dig into a little bit here, I'm going to let Helgi start with this one because he introduced it to me, and I've introduced it to many others. And I think I'm going to let him start with Fear is the Mind Killer.
So yeah, Fear is the Mind Killer. I think the important part is actually the subtitle of this, which is How to Build a Training Culture that Fosters Strength and Resilience by Kaya Sadowski. And this is one of the things that we miss a lot. You know, so much of our training is focused on of being a coach is, you know, focused on technique of how to make things, you know, how to correct mistakes, how to help people see advantages or, you know, detect weaknesses, so forth. That we miss the underlying ideas of how we build the culture of training. How do we help create a social environment where people not only want to learn, but are willing to put themselves out there and experiment, to experience, you know, to allow themselves to fail, right? Because that is at the heart of learning, right? If when we go out and we fight, if we don't allow ourselves to fail, we aren't learning. And learning happens when we can make mistakes and we are psychologically comfortable enough to make mistakes. And Ms. Sadowski goes through lots of different concepts in there, from you know, building, you know, the fundamental ideas of consent in martial arts, to the to things as you know, concrete as building rules and regulations in your own training studio. You know, how to dress problem individuals, to dealing with things like PTSD, and just tons of stuff. So if anybody else has.
Can I just add something about Fear is the Mind Killer?
Yes.
I know, oh, am I good?
Go ahead.
Okay. I know a lot of you have asked a lot about how you can make the culture better for women. Fear is the Mind Killer is the book you need to read in order to figure out some of the things you can do to shape practices and training and the culture to better nurture women fighters and keep them in the sport. Read it and put it into practice.
Yep. That's a good one. Tristan, did you have anything on that one?
No, in fact, I like your guys' description of that one. It reminds me of three of the books that I put on the list, which are The Martial Arts Teacher by Jonathan Bluestein, Martial Arts Instruction by Lawrence Kane, and The Leadership Dojo by Richard Strozzi Heckler. And these are all books that are the feel is, okay, you are now setting up a dojo or you're running your own practices. Here's how you do it. Here's how you structure it. Here are things to think about. And they have some material in there for dojo owners, like how do you charge tuitions, things like that that are not applicable. But they have a lot in there that covers exactly what is covered in this book as well, which is how do you deal with how you set up the culture, how do you deal with teaching somebody of an opposite gender, how do you teach children, how do you work with different types of people, how do you solve problems, how do you deal with problem students, how do you maintain a healthy culture, how do you build it, and how do you maintain that culture. And so I'd put it right alongside that one, and I will actually go read Fear is the Mind Killer, because you can't get enough of that when you take on the coaching role, and when you take on the role of setting up a practice. And don't think that because the practice, you aren't the one creating it or building it, that you don't affect it. If you're the one person that's there all the time, you will be looked to as a coaching figure or as a mentor figure. So when you take on that mentor role, or that role is imposed on you, make sure that you do your homework so that when you're called upon to fill that role, you can step correctly and not misstep and create a culture problem. So these are all very good sources for that. And they're all the ones that I've read. The other three are written in a very plain language, very easy to read, very to the point, and are great resources for anybody who's a night marshal, head of a household, even just somebody that wants to form up a small group and start to create that culture. Because I did that with my dojo, that was one of my big homework assignments. Is I wanted to create a positive culture right from the get-go, and I wanted to maintain it and never let it slip. And that's, those books allowed me to do that.
One last point.
Yeah, go ahead, Helgi.
So the other thing, I mean, Sadowski specifically cites Rory Miller and some of these other ones that you've talked about. So she is built on the shoulders of giants, right? The ideas of I'm sorry, I had it.
Creating a culture.
Well, creating the culture. But some of the other points that I thought were really fantastic were things like how do you create good training partners, right? And sometimes when you want to improve one person in a partnership, you don't give them advice. You give advice to their training partner to adjust how hard they're going, and that helps bring out the improvement that you want in your opponent. There's a great section in there on stress testing and stress inoculation. When we are afraid of something, how do we get over that fear, right? Because part of it has to be putting ourselves in these situations that make us uncomfortable, but knowing that it's a safe place, that we are not going to get hurt even if it triggers us. And again, that ties back into that fundamental idea of consent in the martial arts, and especially in a training environment. The ideas of buy-in and opt-in, or the concepts of opting out of a drill that makes you uncomfortable, or creating an environment where opting out is acceptable, is really key. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on something that Tristan had mentioned there too. The idea that when your role as a trainer is sort of thrust upon you, that's something that some of us may not be prepared for. All right, when you are the local night marshal, or when you are certainly by the time you've been knighted, we generally expect that night level fighters are kind of become teachers of our sport. And being a trainer and teaching somebody how to do this does carry a certain responsibility with that, both in how you treat your students and the environment that you're creating to be more conducive to your students, and in the content that you're teaching them. I mean, if you're teaching people to be a dick then they're going to go out in the world and they're going to teach other people how to be a dick. And so these kind of books are the sort of things that kind of set up a culture that is conducive and something that like everybody would want to be a part of. And I think that's really important. And it's something that, Tristan, in setting up his own mundane Aikido dojo, very specifically goes out and creates this thing from scratch. And if you don't deliberately create that environment, I think there's potential to accidentally create an environment that people don't want to be part of. So I think that was a pretty important part of what he was kind of illustrating.
And
there.
it's easy to think too that as a mentor or a trainer, you're thinking, well, if I do good, then the people that I teach will just learn a little faster, and if I do poorly, they just won't learn very fast. That doesn't even cover the ante on the table. Like if you haphazardly screw it up, you can create a culture so toxic that people will come and immediately leave. Like they won't even stick around. Like this can kill the future of a practice group. Like that's how serious this is. Yeah. So it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah. And it's like we think early on especially when we first start teaching people to fight, it's like, oh, I'm going to make people better fighters. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? I mean, are you teaching people strictly how to win? I mean, is that the victory condition that you've created for your training environment? And yeah, you can very easily just go out and teach people how to win, and you can teach them all sorts of ways in which to win, many of which for a society that we are part of, that values honor and chivalry. Some of those techniques that you use to just get the easy kill are not necessarily techniques and practices that we want to encourage. And so, yeah, be deliberate about how you create that, because if you don't, it will take on a life of its own, and a life you may not be proud of.
And a side note, I know that we do have that on our schedule for an episode coming up in the future, which is how to build a healthy practice from scratch. So we'll be covering that in a future episode on Coach's Corner.
Yep. Right on. So Rivkin and Helgi, you guys got anything else on this section here? Let's see.
I've got a couple that I added. One is both of these are by Rory Miller. One's called Principles-Based Instruction, and this is, I think, a good book to cover how you actually teach, because there are two different types of instructors or teachers, and the formula-based is if you want X to happen, then you do Y to get that result, and that is not a very effective teaching style, but it's almost instinctual as people start to get into teaching or start to get into mentoring. And it's a good book to talk about how you actually are just teaching principles and how you can look at creatively making exercises and drills to highlight those principles. And you'll find a much better effect with your students when you take on teaching principles when you structure their learning. And then the second book, which is Training for Sudden Violence, and this one may not seem like it fits, but when it goes through, it actually gives specific drills, so you can see how drills are created and structured in such a way to provide those principles and to build them in students. And it's easy, as a lot of us will have learned to fight, is you go out and you spar and you learn, and that's it. But the more structure you give, the better and more efficiently you can teach and have that knowledge conveyed. And so these are two very good books for showing what that blueprint looks like and how it's built.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last section that we have on this, as far as the categories that we have for books, is physical fitness and physiology. And as I was mentioning earlier, this is not exactly my strong suit. So I'm gonna sit back and let somebody else take this one. But the first book we have is Building the Supple Leopard by Kelly Starrett. Tristan, is
Dr.
that
Kelly Starrett. Yeah, I put this one on the list, and this was a book recommended to me by a martial artist years ago. And I'm actually doing a workout just lifting this thing. And it's a monster. This is like the encyclopedia of being a competitive athlete, especially from a maintain your body, be able to troubleshoot injuries, strains. It covers exercises, how to not only build your body, but maintain it. And it's a fantastic book. It was so good when I picked it up. My wife, who's a rehab specialist, basically stole it and uses it on a daily or weekly basis. It is written by martial artists for martial artists, and it's just a fantastic resource. It's one that you can go back to time and time again. And if you don't have access to a body worker or somebody who can help you figure out what's going wrong in your body, that is a go-to book for it. And I just highly recommend it, especially as people age and you start getting more and more nagging injuries and whatnot. It's just a great go-to.
Right on. And then we've got several other books in this list here. So,
Okay.
Helgi, you want to go over a couple of these?
Sure. So the first one I had was recommended to me by Duke Mark. It's called Ultimate MMA Conditioning by Joel Jameson. Joel Jameson is a trainer for that has trained people in MMA like Richard Franklin and so on. The thing that I found great about this book is that it is really based in physiology and the science of how our bodies develop. He very, very specifically talks about the 3 different energy systems that we have. The aerobic system, which is primarily controlled by our mitochondria, to the lactic system, and the phosphocreatine system, which the latter 2 are really where we develop explosive power from. The problem, though, is that when you develop just, for example, those 2 latter systems, the aerobic system is used to reset those. And so this is provides not just exercises and so forth, to help you develop specific adaptations that will help your body improve. He also goes into structuring that in such a way that they complement each other, and actually goes into scheduling, like 8 weeks out. How do we structure that time to get the best possible outcome at the point of competition? I found it very, very comprehensive. It is fairly expensive. This was about $50. The other one that I was going to recommend is called The Anatomy of Martial Arts, an illustrated guide to muscles used in key kicks, strikes, and throws by Norman Link and Lily Chow. This book was beautiful. If you haven't seen it, every single page has color illustrations in it, describing the different muscle groups that are used, whether they're prime mover muscle groups or they're just acting to stabilize. It talks about kinetic chains and so on, and it goes through a variety of different punches, kicks, throws, and the last section has 4 different weapon striking things. The one thing that I do get a little bit frustrated with this is that there is, on any technique you have, it's not just which muscles are used, but the sequence of when those muscles are used. And it doesn't really capture that dynamic very well. But as far as illustrating the body in motion, it's great. And for each thing, it provides 4 to 5 exercises that you can use to develop and strengthen either the prime mover groups or the support stabilizing muscle groups.
Cool. And actually, I'll lead into this is a book I came across many years ago prior to the whole YouTube thing and everybody having exercise videos on. And it was Training for Warriors by Martin Rooney. And this had a lot, my own training evolved from doing a lot of weights. I had a trainer that got me into doing a lot of free weight stuff. And I evolved to doing a lot of body weight workout with minimal equipment. And this book, Training for Warriors, has got a lot of stuff that requires very minimal equipment, but it's a good index and kind of a library of different exercises and routines that you can do for different types of martial arts performance. So it's a good starting point. I know going on Google or YouTube and saying, all right, how do I work out? You can get flooded with all kinds of different things, and it's hard to sort out sometimes. So a book like that, or the one that you showed, is a good, like a starting point. And then if you want to see more motion, you can look up a particular exercise and watch how it's done or see it described. But I've found that and I wish I would have gone to body weight stuff earlier, but you can do so much with fairly minimal equipment. You don't have to turn your basement or garage into an entire gym to get a very good conditioning and strength workout. And I know that there's another one on here, a kettlebell, Simple and Sinister. Kettlebell is a great tool, and it does take skill to use. It's one of those things, yep, you can, if you don't take a kettlebell for granted, even though that thing is not very big, because you need to use your whole body to move it, for at least from the kettlebell that I've been taught. So definitely do the homework and learn how to do it. If you do get the book, I would look into videos to see the motion rather than just reading it and trying it out. Because with any swinging weight or dynamic weight movement, you can jack yourself up before you even know it.
I would even go as far as recommending that you go and see a trainer to give you feedback, right?
Yeah.
Because so many motions that we do, we assume they're correct because, well, my body feels like it's doing the right thing. And it's like, no, you aren't actually seeing, because you don't see yourself from the outside, right? I included this on the list because I've seen 3 people now go through the Strong First kettlebell training, and their power generation just went through the roof, because this is really all about core strength and core stabilizing development. And out of all of the muscle groups in your body, your core is by far the most important. As you can develop so much power over a very, very short distance. So short that for the vast majority of us, when we watch video, we don't even see the movement, right? It gets lost. But it's so key to that. And there are really only like 4 different exercises in it that you use. But the range of strength and stability you develop out of that is really phenomenal.
Sure.
Hey, Rifkin, didn't Octomasides do a kettlebell video recently? Wasn't he doing some stuff? Do you know where that might be?
Yeah, he had Sir Roland from the summits lead us through a kettlebell workout, and I think Octa has that video.
I know he's watching, so maybe he can find a link and post that in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was Sir Roland also, as Rifkin mentioned, from the summits and on tier. He's been doing some work, and I think a lot of what they were working on was kind of kettlebells that were specific to SCA fighting. So hopefully we can get him to put up a thread on that and some videos, some basic stuff that they were starting to walk through there. So
the other person to talk to is Master Sir Nicolo in Kaid, who has gone through it. He's now a Strong First certified. Master Paul Fitzdennis, also from Kaid, is Strong First certified as well.
Nice. And Octa just said he has it and he needs to edit the video and then he'll post it. So looking forward to seeing that then. All right. Well, I think we covered most of those of the physical fitness, and that kind of wraps up the categories that we have here. So as you can see, I mean, this just scratches the surface.
It felt like we just flew over the list. Oh,
Yeah.
You talked so much in depth on each of these.
Yeah, really can. So Tristan, you got any final thoughts on our books here?
I guess the only final thought I'd leave you with, and I actually painted this phrase in my dojo: knowledge is only a rumor until it lives in the muscle. It's one thing to read and absorb, have your mind go, yes, I recognize this. The next step is get it into your body, like get it to the point where your body knows it beyond just your mind. So yeah, that's what I'd lead everybody with.
Yeah. Helgi?
The last thing that I was going to mention was the Talent Equation podcast. If you are interested in listening, this is another resource that I really enjoyed. I found it much more accessible than some of the other ones out there, although there are other ones that are very good. But the guy that runs it ran the UK, he ran hockey. He comes from that background, but it's really about where research meets the actual practicality of being a coach. And some of his ideas really challenged me, but you don't get growth without being challenged. So I highly recommend that podcast. They do have a great one on boxing and martial arts episode.
All right. And Rifkin?
So I guess I just want to say, like, it always feels insurmountable sometimes to add another thing to your day. So I just really want to recommend, if you feel like it's overwhelming to read a book, that Audible books, YouTube videos, they're all really good ways to multitask and still get this information. It's what I do because I'm a super busy person. I also wanted to say that Kaja Sadowski, who wrote Fear is the Mind Killer, also is on Facebook, and she writes blog posts all the time. I think she's Kaja Swords on Facebook. So, if you find a book that resonates with you and you look up the author and it's contemporary, you're probably going to find a whole bunch of really cool stuff in different mediums as well with that person. And it's just totally worth the exploration.
Right on.
She's also great because she comes from the HEMA background. So she's also not just practicing martial arts, but practicing medieval martial arts. So.
Right. So my final thoughts on this, again, we just scratched the surface of this, but when we talk about the training process, we have training, we have practice, and we have evaluation. This is all part of training, right? Training isn't restricted to pumping iron to get stronger to fight. It's not limited to footwork drills and pel work. Anything that you can do to keep connected to our sport on a daily basis is going to benefit your fighting in the long term. And this list of books and digging into these books, these things, this is what's going to lead you in the path that you're somewhat inclined to, or maybe in the case of many of these books, as we mentioned, totally changed everything about how we fight and about how we train. But when we're talking about training on a daily basis, reading these books is part of that training process. So get to the training and then go to practice and try to apply it. And we'll be getting to practice soon. So bear with us there. So Helgi, you got one final thing?
Oh, and like Misty, or excuse me, Rifkin said, take notes.
Yep.
I that's a great process of taking the information and yeah.
Right on.
Anyway.
So let's see, coming up next week on the Coach's Corner, we have our conversation with, and this next week we'll be having a conversation with Duke Radnor from the West Kingdom. Radnor's kind of legendary, especially in the West Coast, not only for winning crown multiple times, but he is just a phenomenal trainer of our sport. I know he's worked quite a bit with Sagan, one of our other coaches, and a lot of Sagan's training methodology is kind of developed in conjunction with what Radnor was doing. And I know I've got a lot out of that secondhand as well. Fantastic guy. Really looking forward to having a conversation with him. It's been asked a couple of times in the thread about where the links are. We do have a list of these books that is either available on the Coach's Corner or will soon be available in the Coach's Corner. So you can look forward to that. We have, and I'm not sure, they may be, Tristan, do you know if our book list is listed in the training library that we have?
I'm not sure. I would have to check. I believe it is, but don't quote me on that. I will put a list, this book list that we were using for the show. I'll put it in the comments on the YouTube video, so it'll be right there.
Yep. And then we do have a list, and again, many of which we stole from Rauokinn. So Rauokinn, very happy to have you join us again. Thanks for keeping a list of books, and thanks for joining us. Helgi, keep it up. You tell me to read it and I'll read it. So it might take me a while to get through it, but really love your recommendations. So thank you both for being on. And I would like to say our regular thanks to Vesper, who usually keeps us going. She was not feeling well tonight, so you had to settle with me doing production on this thing tonight. So hopefully we'll manage to track things. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week. And keep the training up, keep it going. We'll be back to fighting soon.
Yep. Good night,
All right.
everybody. Have a good weekend.
Have a good night, everybody.